Just a small trivia. So, any idea what is the image we are looking at? So, this is one of the disruptive innovation in that particular era, and so it is important to have this as I just wanted to have this as a start of my presentation, just to set the pace for what we are going to discuss. um, I think by now you might have guessed this is the 1908 Ford Model T car, which is the first passenger vehicle to be going on mass production. The innovation by the great Sir Henry Ford in the year 1902. So this was the disruptive in the sense at that time the need was there for more speed or time management in order to reach destinations. So that this solved the need at that point when moving from horse carriages to probably the mission-based vehicles. So from then on, we then come to this era. Again, the next question: what is this car? What is the significance about it? Okay, so there will be many fully autonomous cars we'll be talking about, but this is one of the vehicles that is on the road right now in China, the GAC fully autonomous car, which is actually coming from Visteon, supported by Visteon. So I just wanted to make sure that we have, instead of talking about Tesla, Uber, and other things, I think this is also one of the new industry legend or industry pioneer. GAC also is bringing the technology to the users right now. So in terms of the agenda for today, I think we will be going to the fully autonomous car technology. Before that, I just want to make sure we have the building blocks for that also discussed. So in this time, the 2020, I think we are having some new latest technology like fully reconfigurable instrument clusters and in-vehicle infotainment systems. Then as we move on to 2025, probably the cockpit domain controllers, which are actually in one or two vehicles right now. I think this will be in continuous production moving forward. And then as we move to 2030 plus, probably the ADAS and autonomous controllers where the fully autonomous vehicles are coming to be. So that will be the agenda. So we will be going in this order, and also we will be discussing about the key technologies or the key techniques that we are using in order to establish all these domains are safely working, the functional safety and security. Okay, coming to the fully reconfigurable instrument clusters. So this is the modern or the new cluster domain, which is going to be in the vehicles moving forward. So it will be completely digital, and it will have like very intuitive displays and high-end graphics into it. And there is a lot of work going on in this area in order to give the user a real 3D kind of effect, even though they are not actual 3Ds, but the way the graphics are represented, it gives the user a 3D kind of feel. And so to start with, okay, what we had before, we had the fully mechanical clusters where we had only the stepper motor controls and probably little small LEDs that are going to be controlled. So you might have seen in our cars in the late 1990s and 2000 start, probably we had only the mechanical gauges and maybe the rotary odometer and LEDs coming in. So this was actually only controlling a few stepper motors as such, and also controlling some LEDs, and probably around 1,000 lines of code, and less amount of code flash. From then on, we now recently, you would have seen that we have moved to a hybrid instrument clusters. So as such, there is a need for showing lot of new information to the driver, instead of the current modern driver needs to know more about the vehicle, more and more data about the vehicle, and also should be able to navigate and control the settings, should be able to change the language if needed, and also based on his mood, if he wants to change the layout, that also has to be done. So those kind of and the navigation information, all that inputs are being added, and then we have this digital and the analog gauges together, making the hybrid instrument clusters. So this actually uses the dual core microcontroller units with 2D graphics engine. So before, when we saw the traditional hybrid clusters, there was no graphics engine or a GPU being part of the system. But now in modern clusters that we have, there is a need to have the 2D graphics engine as part of the MCU itself. And then some specification details, what is the display size, and also the resolution we have, and also what is the type of OS we use, the AUTOSAR standard. So a little bit information about the AUTOSAR is that AUTOSAR actually is a consortium which is enabling the software development in tier 1 suppliers, in order to make sure that the software is following some industry standard and has levels of abstraction, so that the software is reusable across product lines and also across OEMs also. The specification is common specification, so if we comply with that specification, the software is made completely portable into multiple domains. So you will see a lot of AUTOSAR kind of information in the slide. So I just want to give small info regarding that. And in this type of instrument clusters, along with the code we write, mainly we use C and C++ for development. Along with that, there is a separate team which works on 2D HMI the design and the UI logic framework, basically to process all the buttons and then navigate between different screens. So in addition to the earlier stepper motor control and LED kind of management, the now the focus is more towards graphics development in this kind of systems. And we have the functional safety adherence as well in the systems. So a small overview of the way this structure will be. So I know that most of you might be interested in knowing the details of the way the architecture is, and what are all the different components of this kind of a system. So I just wanted to have it in a very simple manner, in order to match with the level of information that you will have as students, so that it will be very easy for you to follow. So in an instrument cluster MCU, just like the MCUs that you would have studied in your syllabus, like 8051 and Atmel kind of, and Intel maybe earlier microcontrollers. So this also has the basic peripherals like ADC, PWM, and EEPROM, and SPI, and things like that, and stepper motor control kind of designs. In addition, the automotive industry as such needs some peripherals like CAN, LIN, etc. CAN as such is the controller area network, which is the backbone of an automotive vehicle. This is the network which runs across all the ECUs, the electronic control units in the vehicle, and this actually controls the communication between two different nodes. So any input to this particular instrument cluster will be coming through this network, and then this is being processed by the various units, and the output as such is given to the cluster stepper motor controlled gauges, and also to the display. And the buzzers or the chime that you hear in the instrument clusters is basically based on the PWM that drives the buzzer into the audio, and the LEDs are the telltales that we see, which are also driven by the PWM. So this is the basic architecture, I would say, hardware platform of a hybrid instrument cluster. Okay, now having seen the hybrid instrument clusters, what are we actually going to have in future, or in high-end premium vehicles? So you can see there is a shift towards having hybrid, and instead of having even simple mechanical units, it is a complete display and a complete fully digital reconfigurable instrument cluster. So you might have seen there is very little difference between the digital cluster in terms of the display that we have and the hybrid cluster that we saw, and it is entirely rendered in graphics now. And why is it reconfigurable? The same platform, same hardware, same display uh, will be used to show different kind of layouts with the same kind of information being shown. For example, if you see the gear, the ODO data, the DTE, all that information is still intact, and the speedo is still shown along with this, and then the tachometer, the engine RPM, is actually taken from this layout, and it is put on this layout now. Basically, this is a sports vehicle, the Ford S550 Ford Mustang vehicle, and then we are entering from the normal mode, we are entering the track mode, and the car is yet to be start from the lock. Okay, so during the lock mode, we show the graphics of the tire, how it actually burns out when the acceleration is being pushed. Okay, so this kind of intuitive 3D kind of graphics is possible, and so this kind of graphics technology and the kind of digital displays helps us in scaling the graphics, and also scaling in terms of different product lines. So if I have a OEM which is providing me a program, and if they have multiple product lines to be, so we can use the same hardware platform, and just the graphics alone, if we change, I think we can support two programs. This helps in reducing the cost, which is the main factor for a tier one supplier like us. So again, as we have seen, the fully reconfigurable clusters architecture, we have seen the hybrid cluster architecture. Now we are going to see the fully reconfigurable cluster. So the main difference you would see that the stepper motor and the PWM, all those things have been taken off. The output, there is no stepper needed, and as such the output is a LVDS output, and the CAN input is still there, but we also support Ethernet. Also, the information from the audio unit also can be got from the Ethernet, so that we can have some live videos also shown in this navigation, and that kind of videos can be shown in the cluster also. And the PWM output has been changed into a sound mixer and generator, which will be able to give different polyphonic sounds, so that it can be mixed and fit into the speaker as such. And this GPU, the 2D graphics engine, in addition to that, now this GPU is a high-end GPU which supports OpenGL ES, which is the base technology that we use for rendering this 3D kind of graphics. So this is the OpenGL supported GPU, which actually helps in creating this kind of feel. So again, going through the specification, I think we earlier we used 2D or two-core dual core MCUs. Now this kind of system will have quad-core MCUs with 3D capable GPUs, and also this will have display of 10.25 inches to 2080 or full HD kind of display resolution, higher than a full HD resolution actually. So what are the basic challenges now that we saw that everything is fine, the graphics, everything is very interesting and also very engaging with the user, but there should be kind of challenges that we face. I list out some basic challenges here in terms of startup time. So in a instrument cluster kind of domain, actually what is the main thing is the specification will need immediate, once you power on, probably wake up from low power mode when you open a vehicle car. So at that point itself, the cluster should be up, and then it should send out some CAN messages to the other nodes to wake them up. So that and also the initial display should be up within say 1 or 2 seconds. So with the earlier systems, when we had the traditional and the small displays, it was really easy to accomplish this because the loading time and everything will be less. But in a fully digital cluster like this, we end up in having huge amount of memories in terms of 256 MB kind of graphics memory being used here, and to load that in a system with QNX kind of RTOS and everything will end up in having increased startup time. So for that, again, there is the solution is we have a deferred or early HMI kind of, only the needed content will be loaded first, where then it will be the next on priority basis, the main content will be shown, and then the lesser content, lesser priority contents will be shown. So this way we control the way the content loads also. And then gauge rendering. So in comparison to the analog gauges, in order to have the same feel, I think we need to meet the resolution of about 60 frames per second. So 60 frames per second kind of performance in a full HD display is really very complex to achieve. And for that, we have some 3D advanced 3D graphics techniques like sprite images, sprite atlas that we use, and also layering of graphics. The display as such will have different layers, and we will split the graphics into these hardware layers, and then we will render the needed content only. And as such, the OEMs will have change of the requirements very often, and also towards the end of the program also. So in order to accomplish that and then have the memory in control also, I think we have some runtime decompression of the graphics done by the GPUs. So having seen all the interesting part of how the instrument cluster and what are the different units that are working, I just wanted to focus on some of the skill sets as an industry person, what we are looking for from the student community or the newcomers, what they might be interested in order to be a part of this kind of a development. So main thing is OpenGL and OpenGL expertise, and I have given the links which you can refer that also. This is an open standard as such, and you can have the new boards that are available, the Raspberry Pi, the Blackbone, Beagle Backbone board also for your development, and then develop this OpenGL kind of expertise. And then shader programming, these are GLSL shader programming, and this is mainly used in our 3D development in order to have some innovative designs, graphic designs. And then Unity graphics editor and Maya graphics editor, and also basically AutoSAR knowledge on knowing how the rest of the system works. So with this, we move on to the next trend, that is the Android-based infotainment vehicle system. So Again, I just want to have to start from the initial phase. So we would have seen some earlier infotainment systems which were there, which used to have button-based inputs, and we were using the smaller displays in that, and also we were using kind of a Pro OSEC-based OS in that. And we used to have separate chips for tuner functionality, codec, and also the microcontroller is a separate device in this. So from this, when we want to look at the total picture here, again I have simplified the whole system and then shown in terms of very simple architecture here, which will help you to understand what are all the main components of infotainment unit. So again, in addition to the CAN also is a network input here. So the audio DSP, the tuner chip, and the codec, the for the media coding and decoding. So there are three separate devices which are going to be used for three different functionalities. They all work along with the microprocessor using basically the I2C. So by now, I think you all will be familiar with I2C communication or SPI communication. So these are some of the industrial uses of the serial communication that we have. So the microcontroller interfaces with the DSP, tuner, and codec using the I2C communication. Okay, so around 2015, right, we had touch-based infotainment systems. So now, then started using USB, Bluetooth audio, phone book, all got integrated into the car audio head unit. Okay, so now what was the problem here with respect to the earlier technology and now? The level of stack and the third party stack that we use, so one for USB, one for Bluetooth, one for phone book, everything had to be managed, and we didn't have a single supplier, or all were costlier options as tier one supplier. In order to have this built as a software system, I think we wanted to look for a single solution which could support all this kind of technologies. So the solution was to this is just giving in the touch based system. The change from the earlier architecture is that we have the microprocessor integrated with all the things in a single chip now. So the advancement in the electronics industry is condensing all the electronic components into single units now. So as more and more advancements are happening, all these separate devices are combined into a single chip, and then all giving all the functionality. And that is one of the changes with respect to the old architecture that we saw. So moving to the problem that we saw with respect to the different engaging different suppliers. So the solution was provided in terms of Linux units, where the Linux drivers are open source, and we need not worry about different vendors for the different things. I think they provide the Linux community as such has solutions for all the kind of device drivers that are widely used. So in that regard, I think the whole domain or the whole industry moved towards Linux, and they wanted to use a scaled down version of Linux with taking into consideration the memory of footprint of a embedded automotive system. And why we are talking about Linux in the infotainment system and not in a cluster system? So cluster is still using some AUTOSAR based OS or a real-time operating system as such, because Linux, as you would know, is not a real RTOS as such. It is an operating system with all the functionalities, but when compared to any critical response rates and which are needed in a safety system like a cluster, I think Linux will be very not not suiting to that particular response and critical requirements. So that is why it is not used in a cluster kind of a domain. But as a infotainment unit which is less safety critical, and it is having lesser response requirements. I think Linux has been promoted here. And moving from Linux, so then again there was a shift in the automotive industry towards when the users all wanted their smartphone capabilities while driving or while they are in travel also. So the need for Android coming into Linux was really unstoppable. Okay, and so what is that gives Android upper hand? Okay, the user friendliness, reliability, and availability of apps. So as a smartphone user, I think you will all be thrilled to use Android kind of device where you are familiar with the way it navigates and the how the different application works. So when you enter a car and you want to replicate, so initially there was systems, there was a support. How it was brought is some of the applications like Android Auto and CarPlay came into consideration, where the user can mirror their smartphone into the Android into the IVA system itself. So with that coming into picture, I think more and more requirement or demand was there to move into a complete Android based system. So for that, initially the Android or Google was not supporting the automotive environment. This was mainly targeted for the smartphone industry. As an automotive environment, there is definitely there are some limitations when using Android, because most of the applications in it are not automotive grade, and the OS is not also built for a particular automotive system as such. So what happened is the OEMs started using Android, and they customized the Androids for their needs, and then they started building systems on top of that. But what was the problem? Whenever the Google releases new Android version, the suppliers or the OEM have to rebuild their whole system, integrating the Android layer back into their system. So this was a very cumbersome task, and it was time consuming. Okay, so what was the solution? And by 2017, I think Google realized the need for Android or demand for Android in automotive. They started supporting the Android, what was lacking with respect to Android. They introduced the hardware interface differential language, which helped in terms of providing the control into the automotive system, into take the data from the vehicle in the Android itself, and not go for OEM based software stack for that. So that way, I think introduction of Android P is a welcoming move with respect to Android automotive Android community. So this is a simple architecture of what comes from Android, what comes from the OEM, and also what are the third-party apps as such. So earlier, the OEM had to build the hardware abstraction layers in addition to the Android services, and then given with Android P, I think this support for vehicle network was not there, and then introduced right now. So this helps in taking Android to next level in the infotainment domain. So again, the with respect to IVI domain, what are the needed skills? I would say it's all Android. Moving forward, the automotive infotainment systems are totally dependent on Android apps and Android UI development, and to some extent the Linux device drivers for accessing the vehicle HAL layer. Okay, so we have talked about two domains that we started with, the instrument clusters and the automotive infotainment system. Now, the next generation technology is going to be cockpit domain controllers. So the cockpit domain controllers are technology where we are going to, so earlier we saw in a single infotainment unit, how the microprocessor and the peripherals like tuner, everything got integrated as a single chip. So now we are extending that into a complete hardware domain itself. So separate ECUs, being the instrument cluster, the infotainment system, the HUD, the heads-up display system, the climate control, the HVAV system, and also the silver box radio system, whatever we have, everything is packed into a single hardware. Okay, so you have a single hardware, base hardware, which drives two displays or more than two displays if needed, and it comes as a single system as such. So how it helps? So this helps in terms of reducing the complexity with respect to networking, the communication going between this, and also reducing the space in the cockpit of the car, and also the cost of the two systems when combined together. It comes combined cost of the two system in a single hardware platform is very less. So this is a win-win situation for both the car manufacturer or the OEM. OEM, for your information, it is original equipment manufacturer, which is an industry term used for the car manufacturers like Ford, GM, and Tata, Mahindra, and Hyundai. Okay, so this helps in reducing their complexity. The need for space in the cockpit is a very critical thing as a OEM, and when we combine two different units or more than two units here, it is a welcome move for the OEM, and also for a tier 1 supplier like us. I think this will be reducing the complexity in terms of specification needs when we want to engage. In case if we are providing a single domain like instrument cluster alone to a OEM, and the infotainment unit is coming from another supplier, so probably there is a lot of complexities in achieving the system together in terms of inconsistencies in the system specification and things like that. Now that it falls under a single umbrella, I think we are seeing that it is easy to develop such technology as such. So what is the backbone of such a domain controller? This is the hypervisor, or the hypervisor in simple terms, you would say, like in our PCs, I think in recent days we are using both Windows and Linux and any kind of OS that we are able to mount as a virtual machine. So under a single hardware, we are hosting two separate machines which are independently controlling the hardware, but are working as a two separate machines. The same technology is brought into an embedded system, where the hypervisor is a software which hosts both the domain control, the infotainment domain, and also the cluster domain as such. And both work independently and is using the resources that is common to both. Okay. So as such, like I mentioned, so the hypervisor stands below both layers. So you are seeing the cluster domain here and also the IVI domain here, and the hypervisor being the common unit below both domains. It loads both these domains, and it actually has the processes as such work independently in these. What happens is, initially the hypervisor loads these two systems. It starts these systems independently, and the processes corresponding to these systems run independently in their own virtual machine kind of architecture. And whenever the communication needs to happen between these two devices, I think that goes through the hypervisor and controls and gives a interrupt into the hardware, and that interrupt in the hardware is being fed into the other device, and then that communication goes on into the other domain as such. So the scalable middleware solution enable the communication between the two domains. And what are the significant features? So you would have seen some videos or any technological sessions where you swipe and then you are able to move the display content from different one display to the other display. So that kind of technology is possible because the underlying GPU is a common GPU, and it is the technique called advanced virtualization is what is making it possible, where you can the controller can decide based on the content that are shown in these displays. We can actually decide what display can be shown in what domain as such. So again, the network communication, earlier case through CAN, is no longer needed, and this is more like a inter-process communication. So for any computer science person, the inter-process communication is a generic term where you talk about how the processes and communicate each other. So in a so much complex system, the communication underlying technology is going to be a simple inter-process communication only. And again, functional safety requirements. We have a separate topic, and I have some slides on functional safety moving forward. Right now, just understand that even though there is a single system, there are two different domains, and the functional safety compliance can be made sure for a specific domain independently instead of having the two domains as such. So again, for the CDC, what is the skill set we will be expecting? So here, these are some advanced techniques like virtualization, hypervisor technologies, and inter-process communication, and GPU virtualization, and the driver virtualization as such. So how can you use the same kind of device drivers across two domains as such? Then we move on to the autonomous domain controllers, our interesting topic. And right now, the driverless car is around the horizon, and so it is just it is not like is it possible or it is just a question of when and how quick it is going to be around there. So what is the need for a driverless car? So here I would like to point out that it's kind of a paradox. So initially when I start this itself, a lot of questions will be popping out in your mind. Why driverless car? What is the safety of this, and is it not going to be dangerous for the using a driverless car? So actually speaking, that the driverless cars initiative is actually to improve safety, because 94% of the accidents are caused by human error. So at least in developed countries and where we have the proper infrastructure, I think the infrastructure is a key in going towards driverless cars. So there, at least, I think we will be able to achieve this driverless car kind of technology by say 2030 or so. Okay, so what happens is this: the mission will not have any kind of it will go by the sensing and other things, and it will not have any emotion or any kind of disturbance due to watching mobiles or anything like that. So that kind of a human error is can be reduced by going for a mission based or autonomous driving. So again, a reduced congestion, where it will all follow rules, and everything will be according to the it will follow, and the traffic will be reduced a lot. Okay, so another option I would like to point out is given this driverless car, whoever is disabled people or elderly people who are right now not capable of driving, I think this will be advantage to them. And so those are some of the points as such. So in talking about driverless cars, I think main points we have to notice, there are different levels of driving automation being specified by the software automotive industry, where the level 0 is no automation, and this is just the current level of cars we have completely manually controlled. And the level 1 is minimal level of automated features like lane keep assist or lane deviation information, things like that. And all this level 2 is actually going to be adaptive cruise control. And I think this is already there in vehicles right now. And where if you go on a highway, I think you can just keep it in cruise control, and you just have to leave it, just to have some steering control alone, and remove your control from the accelerator as such. So this is already there. And as we move on to the next level, the level 3, level 4, level 5 are the main points which are of interest here. So in the level 3, I think we are talking about much more control, where the human will be asked or prompted by the system in order to take the control. And whenever needed, the driver is still in control of the vehicle in terms of who is managing the environment as such. Driver has more control over the automated system here. And in level 4 is completely automated without any driver interference. In level 3, I think at least only the highway and in smaller roads and very in city kind of roads, I think it is expecting the driver to be taking control over it. In level 4, without any intervention from the driver, the car can be driving, but it will prompt again in terms of any situation where it is not able to take it feels that it is not able to control the situation. I think it will prompt and raise a panic to the driver, and he is expected to take control of this. And level 5 is the one where we have a completely fully automated system, where it doesn't require any kind of intervention from the driver. So in the level 4, the system is expected to go into a safety state once it detects, and without even if the driver doesn't take notice of the interruption also, I think it will go to a safety state. So that is achieved in level 4 itself. And the level 5 is complete full autonomous vehicles. So I have given the timelines here when we expect this to be coming. I think as and when the technology updates, I think we are having more and more inputs on this, how the technology actually evolves. And based on the information that we have, I think the technology as such is getting changed, and the algorithms developed and everything is taking all the inputs into consideration and taking the necessary step. So what is mainly the different steps in an autonomous driving vehicle? So you can say in 3 terms, like sensing and perceiving and planning, and also then finally acting. So sensing part will be the sensors, the different sensors, the radars, the camera, front camera, rear camera, the LiDAR kind of sensors, the image processing kind of technique that we are doing. Everything is part of the sensor or sensor domain as such in this. And all the inputs are fused together as common information, or taken into consideration in the perception or the planning unit. All the inputs from our different sensors are taken, and all the different parameters in each and every sensor is taken into consideration in the planning and perception. The planning and perception is where your machine learning or deep learning come into picture. And based on the deep learning algorithms, the action and command to the actuators in controlling the steering, accelerator and pedal is actually being sent. So in a simple nutshell, I think you can say sense, perceive and act are the 3 different blocks of a autonomous driving system. So here again, the technologies to learn will be the radar, LiDAR kind of sensor inputs, how these are working, and also the new sensor technologies that are needed. I think those will be very interesting to learn. And machine learning, deep learning kind of algorithms, or machine learning, deep learning as a whole topic itself you can learn, and Python and data analytics. Okay, so we talked about the different domains as such, and now how we are ensuring the functional safety. So we are talking about more and more software in terms of 100,000 lines, million lines of code going into the different units. How are we ensuring the safety in these systems? So the ASIL is a safety standard which actually is going to be defining the ASIL levels of these controllers in terms of taking into consideration the factors, the severity, probability, and controllability. The probability uh, is a factor in which it defines what is the probability that this particular system, if it fails, will be leading to a casualty or for a person or a property. And then the controllability says how possible it is, for this system to, for if the information is given to the driver, or the person is still able to safely maneuver this particular situation and then go to a safety state. This is the controllability, and severity is the impact of the particular failure. So based on this, so this is the exposure, controllability, and severity factors like I explained. And based on this, there are ASIL level B, level C, level D, QM, and level A kind of a systems. So the safety standards, like I said, need some techniques in hardware and software which are being incorporated into the all the domains that we saw in terms of clusters, or the domain controllers that we saw. There are the software techniques are being used, and hardware techniques are being used, and ensuring the safety of the system as such. Finally, we have the cyber security. So having so much of software systems into and so many ECUs into operation in an advanced autonomous car, so there is a need to make it secure also. So what are the different aspects which we are taking care in order to ensure the cyber security also? So one is implementation of hardware techniques like HSM or SHE kind of technique in the hardware itself. In the hardware manufacturing itself, the public key generation, everything is taken into consideration. And also in terms of when booting, the software is made a secure boot with respect to only the authenticated applications will be able to run from the OS when the OS starts. And then the communications, the inter-processor communication or the network communications are all encrypted, and also the data storage is also ensured with some encryption. And in manufacturing also, these are made as one-time fuses so that the code or anything cannot be changed as such. So these are the different security-based techniques that we have.